Welcome back. Turning now to the war in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is heading to Washington tomorrow to meet Donald Trump. The U.S. president says he wants to bypass a ceasefire in Ukraine and move directly to a permanent peace agreement based on Ukraine giving up territory to Russia. Now, that move breaks from the strategy that Ukraine and European allies had agreed on. Trump had previously called for a ceasefire, but switched focus after his meeting on Friday with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. CBC's Julia Chapman in London has the latest.
When Volodymyr Zelenskyy visits the White House on Monday, the stakes for Ukraine will be incredibly high because, as you say, after the Alaska summit, Donald Trump appeared to move closer to the Russian position on many issues. That includes working on a peace deal instead of an immediate ceasefire, reportedly a discussion of Ukraine handing over territory that it still controls. And we've also heard U.S. officials moving away from the threat of sanctions. Now, U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, speaking on CNN this morning, says the Russians have also been making concessions. We don't know exactly what those are, and Zelenskyy will be looking for more detail in that meeting tomorrow. But speaking today, he was insistent that the current front line is where negotiations must start. And of course, we'll be watching for the tone of this meeting too. How is Zelenskyy received this time around compared to the dressing down that he got in February?
Leaders were shut out of the meeting in Anchorage, Alaska, but have been invited to this upcoming meeting. Are we expecting to see them there?
We are indeed. This time, Zelenskyy is going with backup. There will be a number of European leaders traveling to join him, including the leaders of the UK, France, Germany, and Italy. Also, the head of NATO and the head of the European Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen. Now, she's been hosting Zelenskyy in Brussels today. They held a joint press conference earlier where von der Leyen emphasized that only Ukraine can choose its own destiny and that its borders can't be moved by force. Zelenskyy said that any discussions about territory have to be held with both sides in the room. Here's some of what he said earlier.
It's important that Washington is with us, and today in several forums we are deciding what we are going to discuss in Washington. Since the territorial issue is so important, it should be discussed only by the leaders of Ukraine and Russia at the trilateral Ukraine, United States, Russia. So far, Russia gives no sign that trilateral will happen, and if Russia refuses, then new sanctions must follow.
Well, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said this morning that what was discussed in Alaska has the potential to lead to a breakthrough in the war on Ukraine. But he also cautioned that we're not on the verge of a peace deal just yet. He did say that the discussions are involving both countries agreeing to things that they don't want. And one area where the U.S. has shifted its position in favor of Ukraine is a willingness to offer security guarantees alongside Europe. And we've also heard from Donald Trump today on Truth Social. He simply said, big progress on Russia. Stay tuned. So that's what we'll be doing tomorrow.
The CBC's Julia Chapman in London. Tomorrow's meeting will be Zelenskyy's first in the U.S. since that extraordinary Oval Office encounter back in February. At that time, the U.S. president berated him in front of world media for being, quote, disrespectful and saying Ukraine's leader did not hold the cards in negotiations.
You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. You're people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
Quite a moment, and not too long ago. For more on this, we've reached Michael Bazarkiw. He's a global affairs analyst and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, joining us today from Rome. So, Michael, talk to us about the pressure on Ukraine, shut out of that summit in Alaska, and now sitting down with a U.S. president who some are suggesting has adopted Russia's point of view.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, every time I hear that clip that you just played, I shake my head in disbelief. It just so underlines, as most Canadians appreciate or are familiar with what a bully Mr. Trump is. Now, the good news is those European leaders, including Giorgia Meloni from here in Italy, who Trump has previously referred to as a fantastic woman who has really taken Europe by storm, they will be there apparently in the room with Mr. Zelenskyy. And I think that's going to help avoid another dust-up potentially in the Oval Office. It's showing very, very strong solidarity for Ukraine. Now, in this whole story and issue, there's a lot of having said that. I think European leaders feel quite a bit of guilt because had they given everything to Ukraine that Ukraine had asked for at the start of the war, especially to push back Russia, we'd be in a different scenario right now.
Certainly. And to be fair, the president of the U.S. has somewhat moderated his tone when it comes to Ukraine, as you're now suggesting. But let's go back to Anchorage and Alaska. I want to hear your take on this summit. I mean, Trump literally rolling out the red carpet, the choreography of the jets flying by. But when the dust settled, did he get what he wanted?
Clearly not. Mr. Putin certainly got what he wanted. He was elevated out of the grave of diplomatic isolation by no less than Mr. Trump, who's supposed to be the leader of the free world, onto this diplomatic stage, red carpets and flyovers, and Mr. Trump applauding for him. And that unbelievable scene of Mr. Putin grinning from ear to ear at the back of the presidential limousine, the Beast, those are the two images, Mr. Trump applauding Mr. Putin and the two of them riding together with Putin greeting, that circulated a lot on Ukrainian language media channels in Ukraine. And, you know, now that we're able to look at the Russian media coverage, they're gloating about this, about what happened. You know, I think that Mr. Trump is now desperate for some kind of salvation from the disaster that was happening in Alaska, or circus, whatever you want to call it. So this is good in a way, because I think he will push harder for a long-term agreement, not a temporary ceasefire. And finally, I mean, we were reminded once again, Eli, of the amateur hour of the Trump team, leaving behind confidential documents in the printer of the hotel, also circulating widely on Ukrainian social media. Unbelievable. Yeah,
I was able to read the lunch menu that the summit had. So it's quite something. But let's get back to, I mean, I'm curious about how you think Trump perceives Ukraine, because he does seem to approach a lot of these things in terms of thinking of power and strength. And on Saturday, he said Russia is a very big power and they're not. And he was speaking about Ukraine. So what do you think that says about how he perceives Ukraine going into this meeting tomorrow?
Well, as much as he's gunning for that Nobel Peace Prize, I don't think he gives a hoot about Ukraine, to be honest. And I've posted on social media and I've said in interviews on CNN and elsewhere that, you know what, Mr. Zelenskyy would do well to study how Canada has been treated by a very transactional Mr. Trump. We've been lied to, we've been threatened, intimidated. And just before flying to Alaska, I monitored that press conference in the Oval Office. He said, Canadians will do anything I want. So I think we can take cues by that. If the United States treats its closest ally the way it has with such contempt, Mr. Zelenskyy has to tread very, very carefully. But again, now that more spending is being assumed by the Europeans for the war in Ukraine, Ukraine has upped its domestic drone production, things like that. There's going to be less of a reliance on the United States. But for now, make no mistake about it, those security guarantees, intelligence sharing, Patriot missile defense systems are very, very important for Ukraine for the time being.
And certainly Zelenskyy is going to be walking a very dangerous tightrope. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. That is Michael Abbas-Ercü. He's a global affairs analyst and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council.